just indicate that it looks like this afternoon the technical issues will be part of our problem. I do want to apologize, and I'm not so sure where I was frozen. But on my end, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the program itself. And the best way to do that, I just wanted to quote what I got from the women behind this incredible program, what they quoted the program to be about. So the email sent to me was, "Dear Tudo, we are BDO South Africa's Be Women in Tech team. We're a group of young, driven, and tech-loving women working in the data science and technology risk assurance space. We started Be Women in Tech out of personal call we all felt to elevate women within the technology space using our platforms and voices, as well as being supported by the BDO brand. The purpose of Be Women in Tech is to promote gender diversity and inclusion in the audit and technology industry. We support women's career growth, raise awareness of challenges, advocate for gender equality in the workplace, build supportive community, and foster networking and collaboration amongst women. The program's goal is to inspire and connect women as professionals while contributing to the innovation in the industry through diversity." I hope that really gave you a little bit of the gist on the program. And I'll be basically navigating people here around me, indicating whether the technology is working or not. And then I wanted to quote maybe from their charter as well, which should be the next slide that is showing on your end. One of the critical elements that resonated with me on that particular charter was a quote indicating this is about incremental change, small differences, and making big changes. And it starts with me, with us. So for me, this is a clarion call for all of us to make a change and to start somewhere. Okay, I'm not so sure if my slides are moving. Okay. Okay, at this point, I wanted to basically share with you our speakers for the day. I've got a very great slide that's prepared, you know, with all their incredible photos. But I've got basically speakers from around the world, and I will start with Defna. If Defna perhaps maybe given then the technological issues that we've got, she can put her camera on. Defna Smakla is the Global Audit and Accounting Lead, and she resides in Canada. Next is Buhle Hanise. Buhle is the COO of the restructuring business for BDO South Africa. Bianca Hofer, partner, audit and assurance, BDO Germany. Kathy Moy, Chief People Officer in BDO USA office. Sivan Lachman, Impact Tech Strategy expert for BDO Israel. Hank Galligan, National Lead for TMT, BDO USA. Sandy Dosan, BDO Digital Partner, BDO UK, as well as Alithia Chetty. She is a partner in financial services, BDO South Africa. I hope you can be able to see them on your end. With that said, as indicated in terms of then the program, we'll basically tackle 4 topics. The first one is starting with intersectional approaches. The second one, creating opportunities for women in leadership. The third one, mentorship and education. And lastly, we will then tackle challenging gender stereotypes and biases. So I would like to invite Defna and Buhle to the virtual podium to tackle the first topic, which will be intersectional approaches. And I've got to tell you one or two fun facts about these incredible leaders that are with us this afternoon. So Defna, I guess, given her job, really collects a whole lot of air miles every other week visiting different BDO offices around the world. So if you need any advice to get through any airport swiftly, I'm pretty sure Defna can also advise on that. Butle is an ex-marathon runner and a spinning fanatic. So Defna, maybe just getting right into it, given all the isms of the world, and in particular, maybe those isms being, I guess, women being exposed to many of them, whether it's classism, feminism, racism. In what ways can intersectional approaches advance women in tech and professional services, considering those facts that are spoken about: race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability?
So thanks, Tudo, and welcome everyone, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time zone that you're all in. I am once again in a hotel, as you mentioned, Tudo. I'm traveling once again, but it's been wonderful year, and thank you for having me here. By the way, this is, I think, a fantastic event, and got some great people around the table here. Boule and I just met actually as we were preparing for this event, and it was actually we had a wonderful conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we talked a lot about racism and classism and anti-Semitism and all the isms, as you say, Tudo, and all the discrimination, unfortunately, that still exists today, which is very unfortunate. And we shared a lot of stories of stereotypes and biases, and I mean, I think we could have stayed on the phone for hours and hours just talking about all sorts of great stories that we both had. Some sad stories, unfortunately, some sad experiences, but also some really great experiences. It's really great turnaround and strides that have been made. And the one thing that really stood out as we were talking, and you talk about, how can we do things different in the workplace, and how can we approach intersectional approaches, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? And one of the topics we landed on was actually around something as simple as maternity leaves. And quite frankly, I probably took for granted the maternity leaves and the policies of parental leaves, I'm actually going to call it, that we have in Canada. And so we got into a very interesting discussion. We thought it'd be good to just talk with the group as to, some of the differences that we see existing. And I'd say Canada has actually been really progressive. So about 21 years ago, and I know it's 21 years because my daughter is 21 years old, when I took my first maternity leave, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had some time off after I gave birth, obviously. I took 6 months off, came back to work, and I thought, wow, this is really early. I'm not ready to come back to work, but I needed to go back to work. We didn't have any maternity leave policies or anything of the sorts at that point in time within the firm. But what we did see was a lot of companies actually, and a lot of partnerships actually changing their policies. So there were a lot of corporations that basically said, we are going to allow you to take 6 months off, but we'll actually pay you for some of that. So there was a lot of top ups that many companies were providing, but unfortunately at the time, BDO was not there yet. And so me and another partner, actually, we approached our CEO at the time and we said, here's what's happening out in the industry. Here's what we're seeing. We did a business case, and quite frankly, it was a very simple ask. Right away, the CEO said, yes, absolutely, we have to do this. We didn't realize, was really their response. We didn't realize. And why didn't they realize? Because it was a bunch of men, and I go back to now this classism, or the men around the table, that really just weren't thinking about it. It just wasn't first thought on their mind. They weren't dealing with it. They weren't impacted by it. And it wasn't intentional by any way, shape, or form. And I think that's important to understand as well, is sometimes we think it's intentional and it's not. And the minute we had the ask, and Tudo, you mentioned it, sometimes we have to put ourselves out there. We have to ask. We asked, and right away, BDO followed suit, came up with competitive policies, and they still exist today. What's interesting is the Canadian government as well has evolved over the years. So if you want to take maternity leave, you can actually take up to 18 months. And I know this is even very different than the US, right? Our neighbors next door don't have policies as strong as what Canada has. You have to hold someone's position for 18 months. That doesn't mean you pay them for 18 months. The government pays you for about 4 months, and the firm pays you for about 4 months as well. They top you up from what the government gives you. But if you wanted to take 18 months off, we have to hold the position for you. The other
Incredible.
really important piece is it's not just about women. It's actually the men. So if the father decides, you know what, and every family has a different situation, the father could decide he's taking the time off. So you get to choose whether the mother or the father actually takes that time off. You can split it between the mother and the father. So again, talk about being progressive, talking about the LGBT community. Again, it's not just about a typical male-female relationship where the woman takes the time off and takes maternity leave. It's actually very different. So that was something that I think really stood out. And maybe I'll turn it to Boulay to just jump in and add some of that, because I think it's very different than what you're seeing probably in South Africa.
No, thank you so much, Daphna. You know what, actually, Tudo, when Daphna and I had a session, I almost got locked in at our offices because we're having such a good time.
Incredible.
We're having such a good time sharing our stories. And I think maybe just to touch on the maternity leave issue as well in South Africa, we also have kind of similar issues where a lot of women are now starting not to have kids, or they actually choose not to have kids because they're so worried about losing their jobs, or losing out on a possibility of a promotion, etc. And something like that almost happened to me when I had my 8-year-old daughter. I took 4 months, which is what is the law, Daphna, on our side. And I mean, it can go up to 6 months, but you have to take unpaid leave if you take 6 months. That's the unfortunate part. So I did take the 6 months. Luckily, I had a few leave days, and I did take a little bit of unpaid as well. But what happened with me was that when I came back, the same day that I came back, I think the day before, there was an opportunity within my division for a promotion, and he had closed the day before. Can you imagine? I'm getting back, I'm excited, I'm busy sharing stories about this crying person who can't speak and all of that. And then a person comes to me, a colleague says to me, and then, Buhle, why didn't you apply? Apply for what? I mean, when you are sitting there at home with this little person, you literally completely switch off. So nobody told me, nobody said anything. And I went to my boss, my direct boss at the time, and it was also a woman. And I said, look, I understand that there was an opportunity of this nature. And I wasn't aware. I mean, you used to check up on me and check up on the baby. Why didn't you let me know? And then she said to me, actually, nobody within the team even applied. I was busy interviewing people from outside. And luckily for you, I actually am interviewing someone tomorrow because we had to cancel their interview. Let's see what we can do. And, they managed to open the applications again because I was internal, and I did make a case for myself that I really do deserve to be interviewed, and it was not going to be a free promotion. So can you imagine if this happened to somebody who doesn't have, the willingness to go and speak up and also have a good relationship with their boss, or even have a good relationship with HR, to be able to go and explain why this opportunity needs to be reopened for applications again. So those are the kind of things that happen. Other people wouldn't have taken that leap of faith that I did. So there's still that level of, I want to say, discrimination, because if I wasn't on maternity leave, I would have been able to apply like anybody normally, but there was no communication. So if a person is sitting there at home and there's opportunities within the organization, how do they know? But one thing I think is important is that organizations must actually have policies in place. That's the only way to eliminate this level of discrimination, to say, by the time a person goes on their maternity leave, a plan should be put in place. If there's going to be a temporary person that's going to take over your role, they must know it's a temporary role, and then you're going to come through. What if it overlaps to a period where there's maybe budget times, or there's bonuses that are being paid? Those things should already be planned way before the person goes to maternity leave, because you're trying to avoid that anxiety that the person is going away for so many months, but they are so worried about this thing is busy ringing in their heads. Hey, I might lose out on my bonus because I'm not going to be there to fight for myself, etc. So I think policies in workplaces must be put in place to ensure that that level of discrimination is avoided and removed completely, and it can be implemented in different ways. Thanks,
And I
Judo.
think it's about policies, but it's also about the culture. And I think that's a really big point, that the culture of the place needs to be accepting, needs to be open about it, needs to have open discussions. I shared with Bule before I became a partner in BDO Canada. I was a senior manager, and I was actually on maternity leave, and I came back to one of the parties where, the CPA students pass and everybody gets together and has a good time. And one of the senior managers came up to me and he said, "Daphne, I'm going to become a partner before you because you've taken this time off." That was the mentality back then.
Gosh.
And let me tell you, I already knew I was being promoted that year and I didn't tell him. So I came back from maternity leave. I became a partner. I then became his boss, and I won't tell you what happened years later. He eventually did make me a partner. But it wasn't good. But it's not about payback, but it is about culture. It is about the conversations. It is about open conversations, and that's so important. And somebody asked in the chat, what about passive? I can't remember what the comment was here. It was somebody had a question here.
So
now I lost it somewhere in here.
yeah. Incredible. From what I can hear, structural changes are the major thing here. And in particular, I guess structural changes, those are within company or organizations level of control. And that can only, I guess, be influenced the more women you get at the top, and the more voices there are. That's quite critical. So I've got one or two questions that I'm going to field coming from the floor to both of you, Daphne and Buhle. One says, what about the biases of speaking up and being passively punished after? How do you handle that?
That's a tough one to do, because now you're going to sit there in fear and not, approach the relevant people. And I think what's critical, I don't know who asked the question to do, but I think from my side, what's helped me is the fact that in every organization that I go into, I always make sure that I've got a champion that supports me. And a champion can come in different forms. It can be a coach, it can be a sponsor within a BDO. I can have a tutor who's my direct boss being my sponsor. I can have Bonga as my sponsor, so that if I'm not in the room, there's somebody who speaks on my behalf, right? Because sometimes you don't have the opportunity to be in that room. So you must have that person that you know for a fact, they know what your ambitions are, what your plans are within your organization. Do I want to become the CEO of BDO South Africa one day? That I must voice out. People must know that at the end of the day, Buhle doesn't want to just sit as a CEO of BRS, or do I want to become the head of BRS when Hans retires? So those things must already, as you come into any environment, must be known, because if you don't say what you're feeling, then nobody will know, or the plans that you have in place or the ambitions that you have in place. But now, talking about biases, it does happen. I was sharing with Daphne how at a financial institution, I literally stayed for 12 months on the dot, because, and sadly, the biases came through another woman. That's the sad part. I tried by all means to push back, recently qualified chartered accountant, excited, thinking I know everything, trying to show them how to be efficient and effective. And all of a sudden, the person thinks that I'm trying to take over their role, whereas I was just trying to make the team more efficient and all of that. It backfired. So it does happen sometimes. So I don't want to make it look like it's easy. You can just, have your sponsor and all of that. It does happen. So the decision then is for you to make a decision whether is this the right place for you? Are the values and principles of this place the ones that resonate with you as an individual? So it has to become a personal thing, because every single day, 5 days of the week, you are at this place. So if you don't wake up every morning and you're not happy to go to work, that's a serious problem for me. I want to be in a place. I'm passionate about what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I'm surrounded by people who support me. Yes, you will not get along with everybody, but it must be you must work in an environment where you feel comfortable to voice out, whether it's something good or it's something bad. That's just my
Sure. Sure. And Daphne, I guess the criticality here is the voices. You know, people are saying you voice out something, but you get punished. You know, those subliminal punishments that you get by generally also having a voice. How do we perhaps you know, I don't want to say how do people move on, because those are the environments. They are what they are. You are likely maybe to get punished, but how do we create those voices and allow women to thrive in these environments whilst they're making the environment aware of those specific issues?
These are tough questions, Trudeau, and there's no easy answer to any of these questions. And it's
Sure.
I go back to culture again. I think the culture of the place that you work and the leaders have to create that culture. So when you have somebody like Bonga, for example, who's the managing partner in South Africa, where he creates that culture where he allows you to speak up, that becomes so critical. I was at our BDO US conference last week. They talked a lot about psychological safety. And again, that is so critical to educate people about psychological safety and to have psychological safety in the room so that you can actually be your authentic self. You can actually speak up and not feel that you're going to be reprimanded. So it's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect, but I think creating the environment that allows you to be who you are, that allows you to feel comfortable to speak up. And sometimes we have to recognize, we have to look at ourselves and say, you know, maybe I wasn't ready for that role. And sometimes we miss that part, right? So we're not always ready for that role. We're not always ready to take that next piece. And so having that mentor, having that sponsor that Boulay talked about also becomes really critical. So it's not one answer. It's definitely not. It's an accumulation of a whole bunch of things that make it work. But again, as female leaders, I think it's our role to be sponsors, to be mentors to a lot of the females that are really trying to move their way up, because there are different challenges out there, and there are different issues that you deal with as a female, and there's different issues that you deal with in certain communities. And I think you have to recognize that and be there for people and support them. So to me, again, I always go back to culture. It starts with that.
Fantastic. I am going to call you back, ladies, in our fire roundup towards the end, but thank you so much for your contribution. I see there's a hand up. I don't, we might be left with a couple of seconds, but I don't even know if we can really allow our audience to maybe speak up. I don't know if they've got access to speakers. No, okay, we'll move on. It seems like we cannot take sort of maybe actual questions. If you can drop them in the chat, please, and we'll attend to those. So thank you, Daphna. Thank you, Buhle. That was incredible. We'll call you back right at the end and perhaps to just round up. And so next up, I would like to invite Bianca and Kathy Moy. So whilst they get onto this virtual stage, you know, Bianca, she tells me that as a former competitive athlete and a mother of three, guys, she loves activities that she does take with her family, and that includes skiing in winter and sailing, as well as swimming in summer. Definitely an athlete type of activities, Bianca. Yes. And certainly, Kathy. Kathy has 4 daughters, an engineer, an auditor, a sustainable professional, and a 1-year-old beagle. And I will tell you this morning, Kathy, I was trying to picture what a beagle looks like, and it's the cutest thing. So
I will send you her photo, Tuto, no problem.
I would love to see it. Yeah, so really, yeah, so welcome to this virtual stage, Bianca and Kathy. And I'll start with you, Kathy, maybe. How can we challenge workplace and societal gender stereotypes to create more opportunities for women in leadership roles? So what resources, policies are crucial, and how can women leaders actively advocate for change and mentorship within organizations? And I saw there's a couple of other partners that would have joined these conversations. They may not be on the podium, but yeah, so if you can just give us an input there.
Sure, happy to. And I was enjoying and taking notes during our first 2 presenters' comments, so I'll pick up some of the threads there, because I think they, without knowing, they they set me up perfectly here, Bianca and I. First off, Daphne, had I known that the benefits in Canada were so much better, I might have moved a little bit north. I'm greeting you all from Boston this morning, and enjoying everybody's much better accents. No one ever said I'm loving listening to your Boston accent, but that's the only one I have, so bear with me. But I didn't know how generous it is north of the border. However, in the U.S. we don't, or at least at BDO US, we don't split parental leave. We don't call it maternity leave anymore. We call it parental leave. And if you're a parent, whether you have two dads, two moms, a mom and a dad, or a single parent, you take your leave. So that is our sign of progress. At least we keep moving forward. I really like Daphne's comment that, and I wrote it down as where policy meets culture. That intersection is critical to success. And my version of that is, I think ultimately it needs to be personal, right? Ultimately, things are relationship based and get done not based on policies, but based on human interaction. That said, you can't do it without the protection, I'll call it the air cover of appropriate policy and tone at the top. You know, my story is when I joined BDO, I grew up as a tech audit partner at Arthur Andersen, but when I joined BDO, I just kind of told them what I needed. Like, I have 3 children under 10 years old and I work 80% workload. They had no idea what that meant. They hadn't met anybody like that, but I was interviewing with, I fondly and lovingly say, 2 middle-aged white guys, and they just kind of made it happen. They said, okay, we understand. How would that work? And I said, it's not that difficult. Whatever work you are going to give me, multiply times 80%, and whatever money you were going to give me, multiply times 80%, and I'll figure out the rest. And they just made it happen. So that said to me, the right culture with no policies. Shortly thereafter, we started our women's inclusion group, and I was asked to join the steering committee. And honestly, I said, I don't understand why we need this. I talked to 2 middle-aged white guys. I told them what I needed in my life, and they made it happen. I learned that wasn't the same everywhere in the country. Other people were getting different answers. No, you can't progress to partner if you're not full-time and things like that. And I thought, oh, I get it now. We do need air cover. We need a tone at the top that says this is the philosophy of our firm. And then people know if they're out of line with that. But ultimately, it has to be personal and relationship based. And I think another thread I heard our prior speakers say is you do need to speak up and find your voice. I know if I were writing a letter to my younger self, I would say, don't expect to just do your work well, and then all that you deserve will come to you. Like, you actually have to say out loud what you want, even if you think it's completely obvious. You know, you're working for more than 10 years and doing well, and you think everyone knows you want to be a partner, and then you get asked if that's what you want. And I'm sure there's some bias in there. How could you want that with your 3 little children and all that? So I think you do have to say out loud what you want. I do think there are nice ways to get people interested in you and supporting you. I think playing to people's egos helps, regardless of gender. Like, ask them about their story. Everybody loves to tell you how they became so successful. And then when they're done with that, you say, well, if I was your little sister, what would you tell me to do? Right? What advice would you give to me? And then it gets personal for them, and maybe they can help you along. I do also like a comment that was made about women, helping women. You know, I'm fond of a quote. I don't know how many people know Madeleine Albright, but she was our first female Secretary of State from the U.S. and European born. And our Tuto, you know, our chief inclusion officer here in the U.S., right?
Sure.
One of Bernie's favorite quotes is, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." That's a Madeleine Albright quote. And I do think we see it, right? It's not that we're all cheering for each other in the way we probably could. It's not that we're all lending a hand and lifting up. Sometimes the competition is between women. The other quote I'm fond of from Madeleine Albright is, if there's nobody in your way, it's because you're not going anywhere. So having some
Remember that.
confidence in the
Yeah.
face of resistance,
Yeah.
I think is helpful. So, you know, I have asked really just for everybody to help keep it real. Like, give me, when I first took the role I have the privilege of being in now, I asked somebody, I'm leaving auditing and I'm leading functions in which I have no particular background, right? I have pretty good instincts, but I'm going to need an absolutely undistorted mirror. I don't need anybody yesing me. I need you to tell me that was partly good, but you might try this next time, or you crushed it, or that was miserable, or whatever it is, but tell me directly and kindly. Give me the gift of higher performance by telling me where I could do better yet. So I call that my undistorted mirror. But I think you sometimes have to approach people and say, I'd like you to provide me an undistorted mirror on how I can take my leadership or my skills or my performance to the next level. The first person I asked shrugged at me and said, oh, I was already planning to do that. So I knew I'd pick the right person who was going to feel psychologically safe, truth to power, and all of that. And, you know, kind of maybe close for a second and listen to what Bianca has to offer. I do think the point, thank you for the shout out, Daphne, on psychological safety. There are some great podcasts out there, and I personally believe it's what's in our way to not just a more comfortable workplace, not just a more successful workplace for women, but I think it's a strategic imperative toward, you know, quality in all regards. And I told the story at our partners meeting about the I don't know how many people are old enough to remember, but when the US sent up a space shuttle in 1986 and it exploded on takeoff, the engineers knew there was something wrong, but they got shushed and it took off anyway. And all of the astronauts were killed, including one of the first women in space. So a teacher who was going with them. So if we have the courage to speak up and we create environments where we listen carefully to all perspectives, then I think all of us will advance together. And women, I will argue, are just better at this. So we can lead the way in creating that context. But I'm interested in what Bianca has to say, so I'll shush for now.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. And you know, you were talking all about the culture, and what is really imperative for me is we must really confront and challenge the deeply ingrained gender stereotypes that we have, not only in workplace, but also in the society at large. You know, as a woman or as a mother of 3 children, I have two girls and 1 boy. I can observe myself how I grow up my children differently, and I try to change the treatment of my children, because if we don't do that, we cannot limit the stereotypes that we have, and the stereotype that exists, they limit our perceptions of what we women can achieve. So it is our responsibility to challenge and change these preconceived notions, and not only us as women, but only of course also the man needs to support us. I would like to give you an example of my work experience with regard to stereotypes. One day I had a mentor and he came to me after a coaching session and he says, Bianca, now I know what's wrong with you. I said, okay, great to hear your story. Then he had 2 pictures and he didn't show me the faces, but he showed me the adjectives that described the person. And one was, that person is powerful, it's straight, it's performance and target oriented, it's assertive, it's hard but fair. The other picture was like, it was written, this person is empathetic, it's sensitive, it's friendly, willing to compromise, reliable, and punctual. And he said, okay, Bianca, you know, the last picture, this is a woman. The other picture was the man. Unfortunately, Bianca, you're a woman. Your body is a woman, but you behave like a man. So you see that there are certain characteristics that people combine with the gender. And he, starting from the point, he helped me to overcome such stereotypes in discussions, you know, when we were talking about employees and the promotion of employees. And he said, yeah, but you know, a woman who is performance and target oriented is commonly known or sometimes known as being aggressive. Then he stood up and said, no, she's not aggressive. She is just performance and target oriented. She is powerful and straight. So he really spoke up for it. So that brings me to another thing. Mentorship is really, really important and plays a really pivotal role in nurturing the next generation of women leaders. I experienced by myself, and when we as women leader actively engage us, like today, for example, in programs, in, you know, on a personal basis, we can really bring women to the next level by sharing our experience and the insights. You know, we can inspire and guiding other women leaders like we do today. But now,
no, I was actually just reiterating that, Bianca. Seeing that we're going to run out of time slightly with you, that actually comments are saying exactly what you say now. That the forum, I've got one comment from one person saying the forum is great. Could we create a BDO Women in the Network initiative to allow for mentors across the globe? So I'm just piggybacking on what you're saying. And it says, especially in offices with few female leaders. So maybe you can just slightly respond to that, you know, how we potentially do. And I see a lot of hearts coming through with that particular comment.
Yeah, so I can just tell from Germany, where we have 27 different offices and we have quite few women leaders, and we haven't incorporated like an official program. But what we are doing from the executive management team, we have 3 women in the executive management team, and we really we have so let me say sorted some women out, and we really work with them. So what I would appreciate if we could do that globally, that would be great, because I think a global look here, we have a handful, or we have a very bright women leadership. Look at Daphne Smagler as I say global head of audit. There are quite a few audit companies who have a female head of audit. So at least we have role models that can help.
Brilliant. So it is a call for action. Definitely looks like there is a challenge, and we'll get to that when we maybe get to the end. And also there's been a question around how do juniors, or at least the person that has posed the question, how do juniors really get involved in also shifting the needle somewhat? And then lastly, the question around why are there so few women leaders? Can be either yourself or Kathy.
Yeah, you know, I think it's all about network. You at least in Germany, you don't get promoted by just having good performance. You need to have the network, and it is important that women connect with not only with each other, with women, but especially with men who help them getting promoted. So that's one thing. The other thing is in Germany we improved the the number of female leaders by the quote. We have a quote in Germany. I used to be against that quote until I figured out that men have an issue or face pressure when they support a female person. So I used to stay with KPMG, and I got promoted there as a partner. And the head of audit, he was blamed for having an affair with me because he really supported me. And he told them, look, guys, we have the quote. I have to support a woman. And it was like an excuse for him. And yeah, I see this astonishment. So Germany is a little bit different, yes. And you have to see that men also have that pressure. It's not only that they don't want to. Daphne said earlier, it's not it's intentionally that some things happen.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, Bianca, because we at least BDO US, we do not have quotas or goals set on percentages, and the reason is because our CEO is so concerned that it will diminish our accomplishments. Like, well, Bianca, Tuto, you're in your positions because you've earned them. I don't want anyone to think it's for any other reason. And to say, I know why you got promoted because we had a quota to fill. So it's a interesting balance, right? The quota provides a push in the right direction, but it can have consequences. I think we are nowhere near claiming victory on all the goals, but I do think we should celebrate progress too. I do think it's better. Right. We wouldn't have been having this call some years ago. Right. And I look around our boardroom. I would like a support. I am jealous. If I could have one of the German executive team members, because I'm the only woman on our executive team. So if I could borrow one of you, that would be great.
I come over.
Yes, you're welcome anytime. But in our boardroom, we're nearly 50% female. In our partnership, we're, more in the low 20s, but the pipeline right behind that is very hopeful. That we've got the pipeline. If we can mentor and develop and encourage these women to get over the finish line, they're there in increasing numbers. So I don't want to be satisfied with that, but I don't want to be defeatist either. I do think things are a lot better than they were. If we could speed that up for the future, that would be even better and amazing. But we should celebrate when we see somebody like some of the great women on this call get to where they are and be in a position to lift up somebody behind them as well.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, ladies. I will call you back as well towards the end as we wrap up and engage further. But thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Bianca. And today there is certainly something to celebrate. As we said, this particular roundtable has been organized by women, and as you heard from my email earlier on, is young women wanting to really break down these biases and their stereotypes. So there's lots to really celebrate. Then I'd like to invite then the next speakers, and that will be Sven Lachman and Hank Galligan, the only man that's been invited to this particular gathering of ladies. So welcome to the virtual podium, Hank and Sven. So just interesting, Sven, I felt like an underachiever when I read and talking about your fun fact. So Sven is actually a 2-time Ironman finisher. So a real, incredible achievement there, Sven. And Hank, on the other hand, I really had a very good chuckle, reading a little bit about you and, understanding that anything that has an engine, you're quite interested in, but it has to be on the ground for sure. And that is inclusive of jet skis, snowmobiles, and your favorite, I guess, being I think it's a Camaro convertible, 1968. Again, I had to Google that one to see what a Camaro looks like, because you said it so passionately.
hopefully you like the way it looked. And I'm trying to figure out if I feel psychologically safe right now, but that's okay.
Right, let me get right into it. So I guess, well, what would like to hear from you, and Sven, maybe I'll start with you. How can mentorship and education inspire the next generation of women, particularly in STEM and professional services fields, while educating men, breaking down these stereotypes and encouraging diverse participation? I guess what innovation approaches can be employed to ensure that we nurture talent and the passion within women?
Yeah, thanks. And I too am from Boston, so hopefully my accent isn't too bad. But I had a whole series of things that I wanted to say, but as I listened to people, I'll probably change it up a bit. The thing that you had mentioned that just resonated a little bit with me was just around education, right? And I will tell you, so Kathy and I started in the same place, right? So we started at Anderson together, and I've worked for her for my entire career, right? And so for me, women in leadership roles is very natural, right? And so when I think of education, right, for everybody, but for me in particular, it was a lot of seeing it in action, right? And recognizing the benefits of it, right? Kathy is a great leader, and someone who I tried to aspire very many of her attributes. I tried to accumulate, if you will. So for me, there's been a ton of formal education, but probably the best education has been being able to watch and to demonstrate. I'll be honest, I feel sheltered a bit because I know that she had many more stereotypes and that she had to deal with than I might have noticed, right? But I also had the ability to then be aware of that as I talked with my teams. Kathy and I also have another partner in our office, Nicole Canine, who was younger than us, and we probably both played a role in mentoring her to a certain extent, and then helping her work through those types of situations and challenges. So when I think of the education part of it, formal is important, but I think real life, seeing it in action and having frank conversations with folks and being able to understand, and perhaps for creating a bit of a psychological safe environment so that folks feel comfortable sharing those things that bother them or that are causing them difficulties has been one of the biggest things that I've seen in my career. I'm not sure, Sivan, if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I do, because I'm an engineer, and I spent about half of my career in various military industries.
Wow.
Way before I came to BDO and found my interest in impact and technology. And I went to the Technion, which is the Israeli Institute of Technology, and we were like 30% women. And then at work, they're less than 20% engineers. And then when you go up to management, they're even less. So the need for role modeling is very, very clear. And just as an anecdote, my life partner has a very dominant mom. And I was thinking about this the other day, and then I said, okay, I'll ask him, I'll give him a pop quiz. So his brother has 3 kids, and all of these 3 kids, they have their own kids. And I was telling him, I'll give you names, and you tell me who you think is the coolest, who you appreciate the best. Now, the eldest is 5, okay? And I was going through these groups of grandkids, grandnephews, and he always came up with a girl's name. Always. And I mirrored that back to him. Okay? And that's role modeling. That starts at home. Okay? So yes, we do it at work, but first we need to do it in our inner circle. And this change cannot come from educating women alone. It has to come from educating men as well, abolishing all kind of toxic behaviors. Okay, and they can be again, they can be gender biased, they can be racism, they can be anti-Semitism, they can be all these isms, like you said before. So role modeling is super important, and it goes in all aspects of life. My youngest daughter, when she was 12, we were having this activity where I live, and we gathered all the 12-year-old girls, and we had this, they had a father-daughter, and they went on a hike, and then they had a mother-daughter session, and of course, I volunteered, and my favorite agenda is feminism. And so I was preparing this real big presentation, and my daughter came up and was looking over my shoulder, and she said, "Why do we need to talk about this at all?" I mean, she looks at me and she thinks that everybody can do what I do, and well, have a big mouth and strong ambitions and a lot of energy. So I was thinking about her question, and I thought to myself that she has a real good point. Why do we need to talk about it? I mean, it was 2020, but why do we need to talk about it? So before I began my presentation, I sat down and I talked to the girls and I told them, why do we need to talk about it? And they had all these questions. One is a triathlete, and she said that the boys make fun of her being muscular. And the other said that when they have a free session in school, then the teacher brings only one football and gives it to the boys. So we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep making it a point. And yes, we need to have some kind of quote, like you mentioned before, and we need to have champions. And like Busha said, when she went and talked and spoke up for herself, that doesn't always go well. There's this study, it's called Heidi Howard, which is one that is about unconscious bias. I really like this. I really like talking about this study, because they took there's this California VC venture capital manager, Heidi Rosen, and this professor took her CV, and half the class got this CV with Heidi's name on it, and the other half got the same CV with Howard's name on it. Okay, so it's a Heidi Howard study. And Howard was a real super achiever and very successful, and everybody said they'd hire him. And Heidi, she was aggressive and unlikable and probably wouldn't work well with other people. The same CV, the same person, the only difference was the name. Okay, so being a woman in a competitive environment is difficult.
Sure,
Okay.
you summed it so well, Savannah. And I think, well, you know, you spoke about mentorship. There's one comment I would like to hear from both of you coming on from the floor. Do you think there is an actual difference between having a female role model as opposed to a male role model who are aware of women's challenges and lack of female role models, and maybe going back to that, you know, the importance of role models?
I think both are important, because seeing is believing.
Sure.
If you see it, you can be it.
Sure.
Okay, so that's
Sure.
one very important thing. And having a male champion that also understands the difficulties, then that's also super important. That's what I feel.
Sure.
I would say the same. I guess, and I do think that role model versus mentor is different, right? You know, I've had plenty of good role models and plenty of good mentorships, both male and female, right? I think it's just a good mixture, right? And I think you're kidding yourself or hampering yourself if you don't allow yourself to have both, right? You know, that's my 2 cents. But.
No, absolutely. Well summed up. We're definitely looking forward to that particular case study. I think it's a case study that should be spoken about more and more in boardrooms, Sven, just really to break down. I think there are unconscious biases that do happen. and just to break that particular ice. And I loved the seeing is believing. Certainly, I think it's very important. Sometimes you can't relate to what you cannot necessarily see. So with that, thank you very much for your contribution. I will call you back right towards the end. I'm going to welcome the last two speakers to join us, which is Alethea together with Sandy Jasan. So just maybe starting off on a light note, on Sandy's side, I must say, Sandy, I didn't see you as a footballer. You know, I chuckled when I understood that you actually really did play football, semi-professional football for your city. So, and knowing what UK is like with football, wow, okay. And Alethea, wow, okay, we might just ask you to kind of give us a bit of a note. So Alethea, believe it or not, guys, she's actually entered Idols. So this I also really laughed when I saw this particular fun fact. So welcome, ladies, and just maybe to dive into it, why is it imperative to challenge and overcome gender stereotypes and biases in today's society, particularly in workplace and across cultures, to ensure equal opportunities for everyone? And I'll maybe just start off with you, Sandy. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, no problem. And I think when trying to answer such a nuanced question, it's always helpful to set the scene. So I'll start by telling everyone a little bit about me. So as a child, I was a real tomboy, and that probably speaks to me playing football. But it's only recently that I've come to understand why this might have been the case. So my parents, they were first generation immigrants from India. And even though we were living in the UK, my parents, extended family, and I guess to a large extent community, they'd brought across traditional thinking with them from India. And 30 years ago, a large part of that was very strict gender roles. You know, what is a woman and what is a man and what are the roles and responsibilities that come with that. And as an Indian female, I was supposed to be ladylike, submissive, quiet, and you'll see over the next few minutes that you know, I'm none of those things. So I think this forced tradition and gender stereotype really made me want to rebel. And as a young child, being a tomboy, I guess, was my form of rebellion. And that rebellion continued into my teenage years. And that's when I fell in love with playing football, partly out of passion and partly out of not wanting to play a ladylike sport, in my parents' opinion, like netball or even tennis. And even academically, you know, my parents wanted me to be a doctor. So I deliberately picked subjects in school that would give me zero chance of being a doctor, like art, French, and maths. So I studied economic science at university and then did an internship at one of our larger competitors. And that's when I fell in love with professional services. And it's not because I had any idea about the work at the age that I was, but I just loved the dynamic, busy environment and the variety, and the fact that nobody could pigeonhole me into what my job role was, or anyone else. And again, now I recently understand that this again comes back to me rebelling against labels and stereotypes that were probably forced on me as a child. So from a work point of view, spending 20 years of my career in technology hasn't always been easy. You know, early in my career, there were times where not only was I the only woman in the room, but I was also the only brown face in the room. And that was hard. And it was hard because it was the first time that I realized that it wasn't only my family and culture enforcing stereotypes, but we also had that in the workplace. And people were very quickly forming a judgment about my credibility and my capacity to do my job based on my gender and also my ethnicity. And I guess that's why it makes me feel extremely proud seeing more females in senior positions, having events such as this and seeing so many female partners across the BDO network. And Kathy quite rightly mentioned this earlier when she was speaking, that, you know, we have a duty and an obligation to help clear the pathway and support the progression of other females to drive equity, not just from a professional point of view, but also in society. And that, again, starts at home, which I think our last speaker mentioned. So in addition to my partner role at BDO, I've spent the last 3 years taking on a pro bono role of being a non-executive director for England's Football Association for women's football. And, you know, for me, being able to break down those stereotypes in a sport that I care so deeply about, and playing a part in making football more accessible to girls and women of all backgrounds, is probably one of my proudest achievements. So being able to relay what I'm doing there back into the workplace, and how do we help other women? So how do we overcome these stereotypes and level the playing field, pardon the football pun, and use our platform with events such as this and others, which are hugely important to help inspire and also instill confidence among other women. And what I've seen, and this is probably a broad generalization, so I appreciate that there are exceptions, but generally speaking, what I've seen in the workplace is that, you know, women can often find their own validation in being liked or accepted by everyone else. But being a leader and wanting everyone to like you is not consistent with making an impact as a leader. You know, being any leader, female or male, requires you to make decisions that will naturally be favored by some and disliked by others. And so we need to, as women, be courageous enough to deal with that and know that it's okay to not placate or please everybody. And that means not falling into a trap of saying yes to every opportunity put in front of you, you know, because as a woman, you should be grateful that the opportunity came to you in the first place. You know, every opportunity is not the only opportunity that will come your way. So we need to be deliberate and intentional about what we choose to do, and choose, more importantly, not to do. And having male allies is super important, but it's also important to see that diversity in female leadership. You know, we want to shift that narrative and working practice about women fitting in the boardroom to women thriving in the boardroom, because we've changed the dynamic. You know, I want to move away from, you know, we need women to break the ceiling. It's we just need to change the way things happen at the most senior rooms in all organizations. And I think, you know, before I hand over to Alethea, I'm going to close with probably one of the most powerful pieces of advice given to me by one of my closest mentors. And, you know, she said, you know, whenever you do an event such as this, ask every woman in the room, or in this case online, to take an action. And I guess the action that I have for every one of you listening today, and what I'd like you to do over the course of this week, is to check in with 3 other women in your network and ask them what you can do to help them. I think sometimes we always attend these events hoping that there's something that we can take away from it for our own individual progression or challenge. But if we start to use events such as this to help others and drive progressive and expansive change across our communities, society, and global workplaces, that's when we're going to see the scale of change over a shorter period of time. So yeah, thanks for listening to that, and I'm going to hand over to Alethea to get her perspectives.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm honored and excited to be one of the speakers on this very important topic. Through my many experiences within the financial services environment, from the beginning of my career until today, 20 years later, I've been privileged to witness the evolution of women's rights in the workplace. This evolution is critical because women bring a unique perspective to the boardroom and should be supported in executive and professional roles. Women have the ability to add value and make a positive impact in the workplace if supported and given equal opportunities as men. Our roles as women are multifaceted, and it comes with high expectations. We are expected to mother our children as though we are full-time mothers and to look after our careers as though we are full-time career women. The number of Indian women in my generation who had to stay at home and be housewives has decreased in my own personal circle, and there are far more Indian women who are in the workplace and are professional women than ever before. This progression is definitely something worth celebrating. So let's talk about stereotypes. Women in the workplace have previously been accepted as those who perform administrative and secretarial type of work. Fast forward a few years, and the number of professional women in the workplace is growing. But how has the workplace shifted to accommodate and support women specifically? In South Africa, we have various legislation which protect women in the workplace. Some of the ways in which the Employment Equity Act protects women are around unfair discrimination, equal pay protection, protection against dismissal, there's maternity leave protection, and others. So South African legislation has progressed in order to ensure protection and advancement of women in the workplace. Non-compliance with legislation could lead to severe penalties being imposed or compensation being awarded. Legislation is one part, and yes, an important part of driving the agenda of protecting women in the workplace. However, this does not automatically address the issue of gender bias in the workplace. From my experience, the culture at any organization or industry, as mentioned previously by Daphne, I think, is much more important than the legislation. Gender bias is a paradigm, and it's far more challenging of an issue to be addressed, because you can't really force people to think in a certain way. Financial services have been known as a male-dominated industry and is still that way even until today. Some of the challenges I have faced are issues around being respected, accepted, and valued. A key challenge I've experienced personally is that I've usually been the only one or one of a few women in a boardroom, whether it is a board meeting or a committee meeting. Having to present to a room full of men is daunting, especially if you are young, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed, and a new professional woman in the room. Feeling like you're on the back foot and need to convince that room of men that you're competent is also another challenge. And then there is the All Boys Club. This is the historical club of gentlemen who have held executive positions in the financial services industry and who play golf with each other on the weekends. Those relationships have been built over years, and it's difficult to build those relationships from scratch as a woman. We have managed to make some headway in this regard, and many of those all-boy executives are retiring, allowing women to be given the opportunity for consideration in those roles. So I think the first step in challenging some of these gender stereotypes is to actually recognize that they exist in the workplace. Then, of course, we need an awesome executive team to drive the tone from the top. And I'm just repeating some of what some of the other women have already said. And ensure that challenging gender biases are at the top of the executive agenda within the organization. BDO South Africa is definitely making strides in this area. And I am proud to say that we have come a long way in terms of gender bias as a firm. The executive team is unapologetic about allowing equal opportunities for men and women and providing support to women in the workplace. Tuta, over to you.
You're muted, Tuta.
So somebody decided that maybe today we are done. Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes. Brilliant. Okay, brilliant. I was just looking and fielding some of the questions coming through. We've got one comment, and as I was saying, perhaps Sandy, from your earlier comment, The comment says, what springs to mind is the concept of imposter syndrome, how we should fit in and be grateful for where we are instead of owning that you deserve and have every right, just as your male colleagues should. And I think it was in reference to you saying you don't have to say yes to things that are not necessarily, you know, within your fit, or that you don't necessarily like. So always feeling like, okay, we are on the begging side, and therefore whatever is given to you is an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think, you know, imposter syndrome is a concept that I've grappled with for the past few years. And I think from a psychological point of view, it's not something that you can just say, well, we shouldn't have it. You know, our male allies also have imposter syndrome. I think a lot of people do. As women, I think what we need to do is almost use it as our superpower. So one thing that imposter syndrome helps me with is if I feel uncomfortable in any particular situation, or I feel out of my depth, even though I know cognitively that I'm not out of my depth, I use that as an opportunity to make sure that I equip and prepare myself for things in a way that almost give me a competitive advantage. And that served me so well. So when you are in a room with people who don't have imposter syndrome, I've definitely seen a proportionate dip in performance where people who do have imposter syndrome, they show up better because they recognize that they have an opportunity and a platform to prepare and let their voice be heard in a way that others take for granted. So instead of being fearful of that feeling, use it to your advantage and make the most of every opportunity that's put in front of you.
Love that, love that, love that. Okay, that actually then gives me the opportunity to move on to the next segment of our discussion. And you ladies can stay on the podium, and I will invite the rest of the other speakers to come on as well onto the virtual podium. So leading up to this particular event, you know, there was a survey that was done, and, you know, the summary, I don't know if you can see my slide at all, whilst we deal with maybe some level of technology issues, it should be coming up. You know, there were a couple of maybe keywords that were raised in that particular survey, being feedback from yourselves. And I will start quoting some of those words because it looks like my slides are not moving. One of the words is whining, emotional, underestimated, bossy and assertive. And these are really often words that are associated with women, you know. So I'm just going to pick on any of you guys. Now you can see the slide on the presentation. Yeah, so do any of these words resonate with you at all? And really, I'll just give anybody an opportunity who'd like to just jump in, you know, which one of them, you know, kind of resonates and you've heard it. Go for it, Kathy.
Yeah, I think I've been around long enough to have heard all of them. The question is what happens next when that's raised, right? Does somebody in the room say, is it bossy or is it confident? Is it underestimated or is it humble, right? Is it emotional or is it passion? And if nobody says anything, and especially if they're just silent, which I believe is agreement, someone has to say something to balance the conversation. And that I think that's on all of us whenever we're in the room. Somebody, one of our partners sent me a note recently that weighed on me in a positive way, but reminded me of my responsibility, because she said, thank you for being in the room for us where we're not in the room. And that was a heavy reminder of the responsibility we have when people can't hear what's said about them. So That's my thought on this.
Yeah, and I don't see other hands. I must comment. I often say the only other prime minister I've heard in the whole world that had a name was Margaret Thatcher. And I always say, I'm not sure, the reasons for that. The Iron Lady, she was competent. She did what she's got to do. But she's the one that has a stage name that we can all remember. Please, Sandy, chip in.
I was going to say that the word emotional is probably a trigger one for me. And I know that earlier in my career, people would say, you don't have a poker face. It's very easy for us to see how you feel at work. And so I think in the 90s and the early 2000s, that was perceived as a negative. But it's pleasing to see that even outside of the workplace in today's day and age, we are trying to push to be a more empathetic society. And, I think as women, we should embrace our female energy in the workplace. We shouldn't shy away from that. I think genuinely that's what's been missing from the workplace. In the UK, we have statistically a mental health crisis, and that could be because of COVID. There could be a multitude of reasons, but that could be expansive across the globe. So what we need more than ever right now as leaders, whether you're male or female, is more empathy, more emotion, more support for our colleagues. And I think we as women are naturally biologically primed to provide that. So instead of shying away from the gift that we've naturally been given, we should absolutely, again, use that to our advantage. It's our USP. And for so long, we as women have been told to hide our USPs, where now they're more needed and more valuable than ever.
Very well said, Sandy. Very well said. Okay, anyone else wants to comment?
I can maybe add one more comment, Tudo, if I can.
Go for it.
There's a small wording in there at the top left that says guilt of a working mom. And it's small writing, and it's actually one that stands out for me because I still feel it. I would tell you today, I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old, and you think it would become simpler, but it doesn't. And I remember when I had my daughter and I came back to work, I cried that whole way to the office, the first week to work. So I think that's something that continues to exist. And I think that's a good thing. It makes us human. It makes us emotional, and emotional is sometimes good. This isn't always negative. And I think it's okay for us to have guilt. I think it's who we are as moms, and it just means that we care and we love our kids, and there's nothing wrong with that. So turn around. It's not meant to be negative all the time. There is some positives coming out of it. And I love the way Kathy went through all the words and just took the opposite, which is very true. Is it emotional or are you passionate? And we have to be thinking that way, but you also need people in the room that support you and are actually going to bring those things up. So you're not always the one that has to bring it up. Somebody else needs to say it for you at times. And these are the times when somebody else does need to say it. But that one stands out for me.
100%. I love the humanity element of it. We are humans before work, I guess. Bushle, please go for it.
A little one also there hiding called physical appearance. When I started articles, I was told to wear gray, brown, navy, blue, and I didn't like those colors. So I came one day at one of the audit firms wearing a series pink suit. What has that got to do with my capability? Huh? What if I'm wearing a cream white dress and I've got orange lipstick? What has that got to do with my capability and my experience, what I can deliver? How am I going to achieve my measurements, my budgets? How am I going to make sure that BDO is, top of their game? So in all honesty, we are always associated with things that have absolutely nothing to do with what you can do and what you can deliver and what you can bring to the boardroom. So ignore the noise. Be you, be authentically you, be genuine. Try and come in as Ubuhle. Don't try to be another person because it will come back to bite you at the end of the day. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
I got you. And there's lots of thumbs up and there's lots of hearts with that, Bushle. Clearly, in terms of physical appearance, there is a lot of opinions. So I don't necessarily see, I did see a hand up, but I couldn't see who it is. So if there's any comments, please jump in case then I don't really see you. But then maybe with that, we've got, say, 3 questions that I would like to pose to the speakers. Not so sure if you can see my screen. If you can't see the slide, I will then read out those. So the first one, and I will pose it to you, maybe Bianca, to kick us off. What is the most impactful action or initiative you've seen that effectively challenges gender stereotype and promotes gender diversity? So, yeah.
That's a hard question. The most impactful action, I would say it's the mentorship in the end. And if you have mentors across the companies, not only within BDO, but with our clients as well, that is something that impacts most, because they can help you, get a promotion. For example, I was the first manager in Germany within the Big Four that became a manager with 2 children, and I was a part-time working mom, just because the CFO of one of my clients said I would like her as my auditor. And we made 500,000 of fee with him, and so I was fine, or I got promoted because of that. And I think that's the most effective thing. Maybe the quota in Germany, but I hear Katie telling that in the US it's working differently. Obviously, it's a culture thing. Maybe I think that Europeans, or we Germans, are not that open, I would say, not that diverse as the US is, maybe because of the culture or the history or our background. So for us in Germany, I would also say the quota is a very impactful initiative.
Right. Anyone who would like to add, maybe? Okay, so my takeaway then on that one is really mentorship, and in some jurisdictions, quotas may work. And my observation with South Africa as well, we've got some level of legislation similar to that, as Alethea alluded to it, employment equity, which then will speak around quotas of ethnicity, as well as, I guess, from a gender perspective. Okay. Maybe then the next question, how can individuals, regardless of their specific roles, actively contribute to broader goal of gender equality and inclusivity in the professional world? And please go for it, Sven, if I'm seeing correctly.
I would like to share with you an experience I had a couple of years ago. There is this initiative in Israel. It's called the Young Women's Week, and they take women volunteers, and we go and talk in schools, in mid schools, to kids that are in 8th or 9th grade. And I was talking to 2 classes. One was a technological class. I think they were about 50-50 gender-wise. And I was speaking about gender bias at work and gender bias at school and gender bias and opportunities. And they were looking at me like they didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And then I went to a regular class, which doesn't have a fancy title on it. And they did have a clue what I was talking about. And the girls and the boys all had all these very interesting questions. I was telling them about my Ironman experience. And one of them asked, do women do the same distances as men?
Okay.
Okay. So yes, going to talk, educate from a very young age. Another thing they said to me is that Hebrew has female and male distinctive adjectives. And one of them came up to me and said, "Why did you talk to us in female adjectives the entire time?" And I told him I didn't. I was using both. And I was trying to use them at an equal level. But the default in Hebrew is using the male adjectives. So when I used the female adjectives, they were just so loud to him. He thought that I was using it the entire time. Educate, be there, talk about it, be a role model. Yes, that's how we can do it from a very small level. I mean, I was talking to a class of 30 kids. Maybe I made an impact.
Sure. Okay. Noted. Young Women's Week in Israel. Hank, can I give you an opportunity?
Sure. Thank you. I guess when I think about how can individuals, right, actively contribute, for me, I guess it would be being for me, I try and be a safe person where people can chat about things that that are bothering them, right, and to try and be active in trying to help them, whether they're male or female, but actively trying to help them kind of break through those, right? Giving them, I guess, critical feedback one way or the other, but also. What I would suggest is also an individual being very comfortable with speaking up and saying their piece, if you will, right? So many people finding a safe place to do that, but so many people, I think, just don't do that because they don't either find a safe place or they don't feel comfortable in some of those, some of the, I guess, injustices of those stereotypes might just happen without even without even be corrected, and it's not because folks don't want to correct them, it's just they're not aware of them, right? But that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you, Hank. Bushe?
Thanks, Tuto. I think the reality is that in South Africa, we still have inequality, unfortunately. And I do come from a previously disadvantaged environment in a small town called Mthatha in the Transkei, where I was privileged to have people support me to get to where I am today. And I did make a conscious decision to form part of an organization called the African Women Chartered Accountants, where we actually don't just support one person, we actually support aspiring chartered accountants coming from those previously disadvantaged communities to ensure that they get the necessary funding that they require to, to study. And also once they've qualified, we make sure that we provide the sisterhood, because as you all know, sitting here, and also those that are listening, we know very well the difficulties, and we've discussed them today, that women face. So we provide that sisterhood. So it doesn't have to be you are contributing one person, you just take one person in your organization. It could be that somebody that's not even one, that doesn't want to be a CA. This week, a friend of mine asked me for CVs for interns. And you cannot even imagine to do how many CVs I got. I literally got about 20, 25 of young women who have accounting, marketing, internal audit courses that they've passed, but they're sitting at home. Unfortunately, we have this huge unemployment rate. So there's absolutely a lot that a person can do outside of what they're doing in their organization and outside. And you can impact more than you could ever even imagine. Even by talking here today, we are impacting somebody's life. Maybe there's a person that's been wanting to raise their hand and avoid any biases and just go for it. So there is that element as well. Thanks to them.
100%. I'm just going to piggyback off some of the comments that are coming through before I move on to the next question. There's one that says, are there similar events for men? It is all good and well to teach women about overcoming and standing their ground, but is the scale being balanced from both sides in order to ensure that we are teaching the one group to stand tall and the other group to allow that and be more aware of their shortcomings in letting women be. So an interesting comment, and I've often heard it to say, look, you know, there is a little bit of an imbalance somewhat. We've got to do the job for the men as well. Okay, so maybe then just lastly on my right-hand side of the slides, I would just like to get also your input, whether you are for or against some of these comments that have been made, which also do come out of the survey that was conducted ahead of this particular event. And again, I wouldn't want to pick on anybody. I would just like to hear volunteers from yourselves as the speakers, whether you are for or against, and perhaps maybe taking us into your confidence on that. Okay, Sivan, please go for it.
Okay, I'd like to talk about women can multitask and men can't. That's bullshit. Excuse my French. Nobody can multitask. Okay, that's just having, that leads to anxiety disorder.
Right.
Okay, women are just better at not wasting time.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Working mothers do work harder because we're better at managing time and because we have a lot more chores than our male colleagues. And there's another one here, working mothers against versus working fathers. That's a big one. Okay, because I don't know what the situation is where you are, but here women are asked in interviews, what will happen when the kids are sick? A question which men aren't asked. Okay, now I would like to share a big secret with everybody around here. Men are half as responsible for these kids being conceived, so they should be half as responsible for them being raised. Okay, and if anybody around here has a partner that doesn't take 50% in supporting the household, I don't know, beat them up. Really, they aren't helping you. Men do not help at home. This is their home just as much as ours. So that's an enraging question. What will happen when the kids are sick? The kids have a dad. Okay, He either chips in or he chips in for the cost of a babysitter. That's what happens when the kids are sick. Okay, when a working mom stays overtime, she's a real bad mom. When a working dad leaves early to pick up the kids, then come on, that's just half a day's work. Please lose that attitude. Okay, we do not need to be divorced for the fathers to get the kids out of school and the moms to stay late. Okay, that was my 3 cents because I was talking about 3 topics. Okay, I'll mute myself now.
Very candid. Thanks for that. Kathy, please do go for it.
It's hard to follow that, but
yeah,
my eyes are drawn to number 6. Women only think with their hearts, and I'm gonna, I think, pick up one of Sandy's comments and put an underline and an exclamation point that I'll change the word only and say women can think with their hearts. I think the world doesn't need more thinking; it needs more heart right now, and being able to bring the humanness to business and society is the only path forward. So I think I'm going to go on the superpower there, that women are capable of thinking with their hearts.
Thank you. Alethea?
Thanks, Tutel. I'm looking at the comment that says working mothers work harder. And I think we definitely do. But I think that that's probably emanating from a stereotype where, you know, it's generally thought of that if you're a mother that you don't bring yourself 100% to work because you have kids at the back of your mind. So I think majority of women tend to deliberately work harder to try and prove that they can do the job that a man can do. And I think that's probably the reason why we work that much harder.
100%. No, thanks for that. Daphna, do you wanna come in?
Sure, I'm actually going to go a little bit different than what Sivan said on working mothers versus working fathers. And I'll say this, I'll tell you that my husband definitely changed more diapers than I ever did. My husband did half the carpools, if not more than half the carpools as the kids were growing up. My husband picked up the kids when they were sick at school, no problem, stayed home with them. Absolutely, I would say more than half. I would say my husband actually was very much a very hands-on father. However, a mom is still always a mom. And I can tell you that my kids, when there's something wrong, when they're not feeling well, when there's something, they do, and it's something about being a mom that there is, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I don't think we should be embarrassed about it. I think there's nothing wrong with being a mom, and kids do come to you. Generally, they do come to the moms when something is wrong, when they're not feeling well, when they want the chicken soup or whatever. If they're not feeling well, whatever it is, there is still something about being a mother. So I would say being a working mother is a little bit different still than being a working father, and there's still that the emotional tie is a bit stronger as a mom. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I actually mean that in a positive way, but there is something different about being a mom. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Sorry, Sivan, but I do think we should be strong, and I do think you should beat up your husband if he's not doing, or your spouse if they're not doing their part of the job. Absolutely. But it's I still think you're still a mom at the end of the day.
Got it. Very different perspective. I note that at some point you're gonna need to excuse yourself, Sivan. Yeah, you're welcome at any point to then exit. Sandy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. And I think, it's been such an interesting conversation, and I don't think we should underestimate the progress that we've made over the past 30 years. And that's not just this group, but the women that have struggled before us and have had to go through some really challenging times when we've not been able to put the spotlight on gender equity. So change is happening, and that's a real positive thing. And I look at some of my clients, and my favorite clients are, the .com tech companies, because I always like to think that they're the most up-to-date finger on the pulse with regards to what people want. And so I'm talking about the Spotifys, the Googles, and the booking.coms of this world. And when I look at their working practices, I was at one of them quite recently. They offer no questions asked sabbaticals. They offer on-site psychologists, well-being rooms as well. So if you are in the middle of the office and you've had a challenging meeting, how can you get some space for yourself in the workplace to get that to compose yourself? So what that's telling me, and linking on to number 10, is, male leadership is unemotional and therefore better. And I'd replace the is with possibly was, although I probably don't agree that it ever was better. But we're now in a place now where what people want, and the new generation that we have in front of us, absolutely want more emotion in the workplace. They want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want to have leaders around them that have a level of emotional intelligence and empathy. So we should embrace that, because like I said, the biggest companies in the world are, so we as leaders should continue to perpetuate that change.
Thank you. Pia, is that Sivan, or is that, yeah, please go for it. I see there's lots of hands. I'm sorry, I can't see that well, but Sivan, please go for it.
Okay, somebody was talking about number 3, technical fields are for men. I would just like to point you in the direction of 2 great films. One is called Hidden Figures. That's about the NASA computers in 1961, a group of Black women who saved the first manned space mission. And another is a series called Bletchley, I think Bletchley Circle. And that's about women in World War II in Cypher. So that's absolutely wrong.
Okay, Got it. Please, if you can drop those maybe movies just on the chat for those that are interested, they probably can note them. Bianca, sorry, I think you had your name, your hand up. Please go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to number 10 that male leadership is unemotional. Since I have a lot of, or some of my mentees are male, I wouldn't agree. Male leadership is as emotional, or I would sometimes say it's even more emotional than the female leadership, because in Germany we say it's like a alpha animal. So they are more, you know, they care more about themselves than female in sometimes. So I wouldn't agree at all.
Sure.
But we are more passionate, I would say. We are, like Kathy said, is it really emotional or is it passionate? Women can be very passionate about their yeah.
Got it.
Attitude, you know, it's yeah.
Sure. No, got it, Bianca. Hank, oh, sorry, Hank, please go for it.
No need to apologize. And I guess I'll pick on number 10 a little bit as well, and just say, I'm not sure all male leadership is unemotional, but I might fall more in that category than emotional. But clearly it's not better, right? I think everything that's going on in the world today would suggest that you need to have some level of emotional quotient. And I wonder, I'm not sure if the news is at the same level all around the world as it is here in the US about OpenAI and Sam Altman being removed as the president and CEO of the company. But clearly, when you look at the board, it looks like it's dominated by a man that might not have been taking much emotional aspects into it when they made the decision.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Thank you for that, Hank. I've got 5 minutes. I'm not seeing any new questions in the chat as such, or comments. Perhaps then I can start rounding it up. Are there any questions? Okay, so, okay. Oh, okay. So the question is, we put these events to try raise awareness without having to directly address the problem in the corporate environment. But how do we get our management, whether they are women or men, to attend the events so that they hear what so many women are feeling? Shoo, it's a pity I can't see the attendance register at this point. I saw that we had at some point registered 240 people that were online. I did see 1 or 2 maybe audit partners from Johannesburg, but I don't have the statistics. So it's hard to comment on whether that's factual or not, but it is certainly something that you're raising them to be aware, perhaps on raising better awareness at a leadership level. The next year's one then coming up. But you do have your speakers all holding really, really powerful and leadership positions around the globe, and they've spoken and shared with us very openly, very passionately. And I really would like to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know you don't necessarily have enough time yourselves, but you spared, you know, a full 2 hours today, and you really, really shared from your hearts. And for that, I'm really thankful on behalf of the team, because I must make a disclaimer, this is not a BDO leadership team event. This is actually an event that's been organized by young women that really want to change the world themselves. And what really moved me the most was the fact that they actually have resolved in not changing the world on their own. They have resolved to change the world as a group of women, and therefore they got together, they had and shared the same passion they actioned something out of that passion. Maybe I can just remind you on the actual charter for women in tech, and to just go through a couple of lines on there, just to show the intentionality behind the actual program. And if leadership, as they say, it's not necessarily people at the top, and you really do get anybody to lead the way, and that's what we've witnessed today. So the charter goes, as a woman, it starts with me. I believe there is space for women to thrive in tech. By bridging the gap between what is believed about women in tech by ourselves and the world, to bring new perspective, motivate other women, encourage us all to set goals, no matter how unattainable they may seem. Through BDO Women in Tech, I will aim to influence even one young woman to see the tech world as a career choice that is for her. That is about incremental change. Small differences make big changes. It starts with me, with us. We can only rise by lifting others. I want to put another disclaimer. This is a group of young women that have put this together, and therefore I'd like to give kudos to them, the entire Women in Tech team that has organized this, and in particular a special mention to Jenna Stone and Emily Teal that led the team into getting and bringing this particular event alive. And we look forward to next year's event. A lot of nuggets that we've walked away. I myself, as a leader, I've walked away with a lot of the nuggets that have been said around this particular virtual roundtable, whether it's certain case studies that we've got to look at. And we've had a number of things that are just, we've been told those are just pure stereotypes and we shouldn't necessarily believe them. So thank you, and a special thank you to you women that have participated, women speakers that have participated. And Hank, you've been an absolute star, kind of been plodding along with these, formidable leaders to really give us your perspective. So maybe just from the top, Defna, Buhle, Bianca, Kathy, Suvan, Hank, Sandy, and Alithia, a big thank you to you. And that will be the end. And please look out. I think straight after the event, next year's event will be announced. Spread the word. The more we talk, the more I guess we get to think and see how we resolve and get together. So thank you for your participation, and I wish you all of the best.
Thanks, Tuto. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tuto.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
The pits. Done.